I've worked the night shift at the Denali Pass toll station, the most isolated toll booth in North America. It sits on a stretch of highway that connects Fairbanks to a handful of mining towns near the Arctic Circle. In winter, which is most of the year up here, I might see 5 vehicles during my entire 12-hour shift, sometimes none at all. The booth itself is a reinforced concrete structure with thick, bulletproof glass windows on all sides. Corporate says that it's for employee safety, but after what I've experienced, I think they know more than they're letting on. The booth has its own generator, a small bathroom, a mini fridge, and most importantly, a panic button that connects directly to the state police, though the nearest trooper is 90 minutes away on a good night. I took this job because I needed to disappear for a while. A bad divorce, worse debts, and a drinking problem that was killing me faster than the cold ever could. The isolation suited me fine, at least it did at first. My first strange encounter happened during my 3rd week on the job. It was mid-November and the temperature had dropped to -50. The Aurora Borealis was putting on a show that night, green curtains of light dancing across the star-filled sky. I was reading a paperback thriller when headlights appeared in the distance. The vehicle approached slowly, too slowly. Most people who brave this road at night want to get where they're going as quickly as possible. As it drew closer, I could see that it was an old Ford pickup, probably from the 80s, rust eating through the wheel wells. It stopped at my window and I slid the glass panel open. The driver was a woman, maybe 45, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. Her lips were blue-tinged and ice crystals clung to her eyebrows and lashes. "And that'll be $15, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Something about her seemed off. She stared at me for a long moment and then spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "Have you seen my daughter?" "I'm sorry." "My daughter, Caitlin. She's 8. She has brown hair and was wearing a green coat. Have you seen her?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am. No one's come through here tonight except for you." She continued to stare, unblinking, and then she reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. As she handed it to me, I noticed her fingers were black with frostbite. "And keep the change. And if you see her, tell her that Mommy's looking for her." She drove off before I could respond. I watched her taillights disappear into the darkness, my hand still clutching a hold of the 20. It was soaking wet and cold as ice. I radioed the state troopers about the encounter, describing the woman and her vehicle. The dispatcher's response chilled me more than the Arctic. "Sir, we've had reports of that exact vehicle and driver for the past 15 years, always asking about her daughter. The thing is, Marissa Henley and her daughter Caitlin died in a car accident on that stretch of road in 2008. Their bodies were never recovered from the ravine." I didn't sleep well during my next break. About 3 weeks later, it was December in Alaska, and that means near constant darkness, and the isolation weighs heavier than when you can't see beyond the circle of light around your booth. I was making instant coffee when I had heard it, footsteps crunching in the snow. I peered out into the darkness, but I saw nothing. The footsteps continued circling the booth, slow, deliberate, and heavy. I grabbed the flashlight that we keep for emergencies and I shone it through the window. The beam cut through the falling snow, but it revealed nothing, yet the footsteps continued on. And then I saw them, tracks in the snow. Large, far too large to be human. They looked almost like bare feet, but each print was nearly 2 feet long with what appeared to be claw marks at the tips of the toes. The tracks circled my booth 3 times before heading off into the wilderness. I reported this incident too, but the trooper who came to investigate the next day found no tracks, The snow had been falling steadily, he said, and must to have covered them up, but I knew what I had seen and what I had heard. A month passed by without any major incident. Sure, there were odd things, distant howls that didn't sound like any wolf that I had ever heard, lights in the sky that moved too purposefully to be aircraft, the occasional driver who paid their toll without speaking or making eye contact, but nothing that made me want to abandon my post. But then came the night of January 15th. A blizzard was rolling in and the radio had been crackling with weather warnings all evening. I was debating whether to close the toll booth early when a tour bus appeared through the wall of snow. It was one of those luxury coaches, the kind that ferries tourists between Anchorage and Fairbanks, but tourist season had been over for months. The bus pulled up to my window and the door hissed open. The driver, a heavy-set man with a graying beard, looked exhausted. "Hell of a night to be out," I said, trying to make conversation as I processed his toll. He nodded grimly. "Yeah, I got delayed in Fairbanks. These folks are eager to get home." I glanced at the windows of the bus. The interior lights were off and I couldn't see any passengers. "How many you got on board?" "Full bus, 42 souls." Something about the way he said souls made me uneasy. I handed him his receipt. "Drive safe out there." He gave me a long look. "Might want to close up early tonight. Storm's gonna get worse, and there are things out in storms like this that, well, you should close up early." Before I could ask what he meant, he closed the door and the bus was off. As it passed, the interior lights flickered on for just a moment. Every seat was empty. I radioed the state troopers immediately. They put out an alert for the bus, but it was never seen again. No tour company had any buses scheduled on that route. No one matching the driver's description worked for any of the local companies. But the night wasn't over. Around 2 a.m., the blizzard had reached its peak. Visibility was zero beyond my boost lights. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the reinforced windows. And that's when I saw her. A little girl in a green coat, standing just at the edge of the light. My heart stopped. It was her, it had to be. She stood perfectly still, snow accumulating on her shoulders and hood. Her face was pale, too pale, and her eyes were dark hollows. She raised one small hand and beckoned to me. Every instinct told me to stay in the booth. But what if she was real? What if some kid had gotten lost in the storm? I couldn't just leave her out there. I grabbed my coat and I opened the door. The wind hit me like a physical force, driving snow into my face. I pushed forward, calling out, "Hey, little girl, come here where it's warm." She turned and walked into the darkness. I followed, stumbling through the snow. The lights of my toll booth grew dim behind me. I could barely see her green coat ahead, always just out of reach. I don't know how long I followed her. Time seems to stretch in a blizzard. But suddenly I realized that I no longer could see the lights. I was lost in a white void. Panic set in. I turned in a circle trying to get my bearings, but every direction looked the same. The wind stole my breath and the cold was already seeping through my heavy coat. This was how people died in Alaska. A few moments of disorientation and the wilderness claimed you. And then I heard it, a sound that cut through even the howling wind. Laughter, a child's laughter, high and tinkling like breaking glass. It came from all around me, or maybe from inside my own head. I stumbled in what I hoped was the direction of the booth. My feet were going numb. My hands, despite the thick gloves, felt like blocks of ice. The laughter grew louder and more distorted. Other sounds joined it. Strange whispers that I couldn't recognize, screams that could have been the wind or could have been something else. Just when I thought that I was done for, I saw it. A faint glow from up ahead. The toll booth. I pushed toward it with everything that I had left. The snow seemed to grab at my legs and tried to pull me back. The laughter turned to shrieking, becoming angry and frustrated. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, collapsing onto the floor. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely work the lock. Outside, something pounded on the walls. Not the wind, but deliberate blows that shook the entire structure. I hit the panic button. It took the state trooper 2 hours to reach me, and by then the pounding had stopped and the blizzard had begun to subside. He found me huddled in the corner, frost covering my coat and hair despite the booth being heated. "You okay, son?" he asked, helping me to my feet. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting and then helped me into his cruiser. As we sat there with the heater running full blast, he said, "Yeah, you're not the first one to see things out here. This stretch of road, it's got a history. The indigenous peoples avoided this pass for centuries, called it the Hunger Road in their language." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because things here are always hungry. For warmth, for life, for company." He looked at me seriously. "I would put in a transfer notice if I was you." But I didn't listen. Maybe I'm stubborn or maybe I'm stupid, but I went back the next night. And the night after that, the job paid too well and frankly I had nowhere else to go. Things quieted down for a little bit after that, until February came. It started with the semi-truck. I heard it coming long before I saw it, the deep rumble of a diesel engine echoing off the mountains. But the sound was wrong somehow. Too loud, like multiple engines all running in unison. When it finally came into view, I understood why. It wasn't just one truck, but a convoy of 3 identical Peterbilt rigs, all painted flat black with no company logos or any identifying marks. They moved all together, maintaining exactly the same distance between each vehicle. The lead truck stopped at my window. The driver was wearing sunglasses, despite it being the middle of the night. His face was blank. Skin seemed pale and he was kind of waxy looking. "Toll," he said in a flat monotone. "45 for all 3 rigs," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He handed me exact change without a word. As he did, I noticed his hand and the fingers were too long with too many joints. I took the money quickly, trying not to stare. "What are you hauling?" I asked, a professional curiosity overcoming my fear. He turned his head toward me slowly, mechanically. "Cargo." "Well, what kind of cargo?" For a long moment, he just stared at me through those dark glasses. And then he smiled, if you could call it that. His lips pulled back to reveal far too many teeth, all of them sharp. "The kind that's better left alone," he said, and his voice had changed. It was deeper now with harmonics that made my teeth ache. The trucks pulled away in their perfect formation. As the last one passed, I heard something from inside the trailer. It sounded like muffled and desperate screaming, and the sound of many fists pounding against the metal. I reached for the radio to report it, but my hand stopped halfway. I mean, report what exactly? 3 trucks with suspicious cargo. The troopers would think that I had finally cracked from the isolation. And besides, those trucks were heading into the deep wilderness, where the road ended at an abandoned military installation. Whatever they were carrying, whoever was in those trailers, I told myself that it wasn't my problem. I still think about that sometimes. March arrived with longer days, but no less strangeness. The sun returning to the Arctic sky seemed to agitate whatever dwelt in the wilderness around my booth. I started to see things in broad daylight. Shadows that would move on their own, and just an overall sense that I was being watched. But the worst came on the 23rd. It was around 10 p.m., still twilight at that latitude. A beaten-up RV approached the booth, the kind of vehicle that you see a lot in Alaska. People living off the grid and moving from one seasonal job to another. It stopped at my window and a man in his 60s climbed out of the driver's seat. "Evening," he said pleasantly. He looked normal enough, a weathered face, a thick beard, the kind of guy that you would see at any gas station in the middle of nowhere. "Evening, that'll be $15. He paid with a 20. As I made change, he said, "Hey, you wouldn't happen to have a bathroom that I could use? I've been holding it for the last 50 miles. I hesitated. We're not supposed to let anybody into the booth, it's a company policy. But the guy seemed nice and harmless, and the nearest public restroom was an hour away. "Sure," I said, buzzing him in. "Just make it quick." He smiled gratefully and headed for the small bathroom in the back of the booth. I went back to my paperwork, listening to him moving around back there. And then I heard the RV's engine start up. I looked out to see the vehicle pulling away, driving off without its owner. "Hey," I called out. "Hey, your RVs." I turned around and the bathroom door was open and the man was gone. The bathroom, it has no windows and no other doors, just 4 concrete walls and a toilet. But he was nowhere to be found. I searched every inch of that booth. I even looked in the toilet tank, but nothing. The man had simply vanished. On the security camera footage that I reviewed later, you could see him enter the bathroom, and you can see the door close, and then 30 seconds later that door opens and nobody comes out. The bathroom is empty. I didn't tell anybody about that one. I mean, what would I say? April brought the spring thaw and with it new visitors to my stretch of road. The ice on the nearby river broke up, and sometimes at night I could hear it groaning and cracking like bones. More traffic started coming through, mining crews heading to summer jobs, tourists brave enough to venture north early, and trucks hauling equipment to the oil fields. But the regular traffic only made the irregular visitors stand out more. There was a school bus full of children that passed through every Tuesday at 3:24 a.m. The kids pressed their faces against the window, staring at me with solid black eyes. The driver never stopped to pay the toll. When I tried to lower the gate to stop him, it passed right through as if it wasn't even there. There was the hitchhiker who appeared one night, thumb out, grinning. When I radioed the troopers about him, they said that they would pick him up. But he was there the next night and the next, always in the exact same spot in the same pose. After a week, I stopped calling it in. After a month, I stopped looking at him. There were the convoys of military vehicles with no license plates, heading for that abandoned installation. The drivers wore uniforms I didn't recognize and paid their tolls with bills that felt wrong, like they were too new and too crisp, like they were freshly printed. One night I held one up to the light and saw the president's face was off. It wasn't any president that I recognized. The bill crumbled to ash in my fingers. May 18th was when I met Ezekiel. It was a beautiful night, as much as nights can be beautiful when the sun barely sets. The sky was painted in pastels and the temperature had climbed to a balmy 40 degrees. I was actually enjoying my shift for once when the motorcycle pulled up. The rider was an older man, probably in his 70s, wearing leather gear that had seen better days. His bike was a vintage Harley, lovingly maintained. He pulled off his helmet to reveal a face weathered by years of sun and wind, bright blue eyes that sparkled. "Beautiful night," he said, handing me a 20. "That it is. I don't get too many bikes through here." He smiled. "I bet you don't. I make this run once a year, weather permitting. I've been doing it for, 40 years now. 40 years? You must know this road pretty well. His smile faded a bit. Yeah, better than I would like to. You've been working here for long. About 6 months. He studied me carefully. And you're still sane, now that's impressive. Most don't even last 3. Most? He leaned in. Oh, this booth has quite a turnover rate, doesn't it? Company probably told you the isolation gets to people. But you and I both know that it isn't that. My mouth went dry. You've seen things too. Oh, seen things, heard things, been chased by things. He pulled out a flask and took a swig and then offered it to me. I'm not supposed to drink on the job, but something about this man made me trust him. The whiskey burned, but it was a good burn, a real burn. It reminded me that I was alive. What is this place then? I asked. Ezekiel looked out at the wilderness surrounding us. Some place that is just meant to be forgotten. The indigenous people knew it. The Russians knew it when they were here in Alaska. Heck, I even think the animals know it. You ever notice how quiet it gets here? No birds and no insects, nothing. He was right. I had noticed how quiet it was, but I had tried not to think about it. My advice, just don't engage with them. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, just do your job and pretend that they're not there. The moment that you acknowledge them, like really acknowledge them, you become a part of their world. And trust me, you don't want that. He put his helmet back on and started his engine. Hey, I'll see you next year, assuming that you're still around. And take care. Stay safe. He drove off, leaving me with more questions than answers. June brought the midnight sun and with it a kind of madness. When the sun never sets, time becomes meaningless in ways. I found myself losing track of days and sometimes unsure if I was coming to work or leaving. And around this time, I had my first introduction to the Aurora Watchers. I first saw them on the 21st, the summer solstice. Despite the sun hanging low on the horizon, the Aurora Borealis appeared, a scientific impossibility, but I had learned to stop applying science to this place. The lights danced in colors that I had never seen before, purples that shifted into indescribable shades, greens that seemed to penetrate even my shut eyes. And that's when they came. People, if you could call them that, walking out of the wilderness. They moved together, dozens of them, all wearing white robes that somehow stayed pristine despite the muddy ground. Their faces were covered by hoods, but I could see their eyes, or rather the light where their eyes should have been. The same swirling colors of the aurora above. They surrounded my booth, standing perfectly still, faces turned to the sky. They were there for hours, not moving and not speaking. Traffic had to weave in between them. Most of the drivers seemed to not see them at all for some reason, but those who did accelerated quickly by. And as suddenly as they had appeared, they turned and walked back into the wilderness, but one of them stayed behind. The one approached my window and pushed back its hood. Where its face should have been at was a swirling void. It was like looking into deep space. You have been chosen to witness. The Watchers have seen your vigil. When the time comes, you will know what to do. And then it too walked into the forest, leaving me shaking in my booth. Later on, some night in the middle of July, it started with a Greyhound bus, the inner city kind that runs between major towns. It pulled up around 1 in the morning, which was odd. No scheduled buses came this way. The door opened and the driver waved me over. I can't reach my wallet. You mind coming aboard for the fare? I know, after everything I've experienced, I should have known better. But the driver looked normal, like tired but normal. Human. I left my booth and I climbed the steps into the bus. The passengers were all sleepy and slumped in their seats. Men, women, children, all deeply unconscious. Too deeply. Their faces were slack and drool was running from their open mouths. But their eyes were open, rolled back to show only whites. "What's wrong with them?" I asked the driver. He smiled sadly. "Oh, nothing wrong. They're going home." "Home? Where's home?" "Where we all go eventually." He held out his hand. "A fare's $45. I reached for my wallet and then froze. In the reflection of his sunglasses, I could see myself, but I was old, ancient even, withered and dying. As I watched, the reflection aged further, skin rotting away and leaving only bone. I stumbled backward, falling on the steps and hitting the pavement hard. The bus door slammed shut and it pulled away. As it passed, I saw the passengers more clearly. They weren't sleeping, they were corpses, all of them. The bus disappeared into the distance, but I could smell it for hours afterward. That sickly sweet smell. August brought a new horror. The backwards man. I first noticed him on the monitors that we used to watch for approaching traffic. A figure walking along the side of the road about a mile from the booth. Nothing unusual about that. Sometimes hikers or broken down motorists walk this stretch. But as I watched, I realized something was wrong with the way that he moved. He was walking backwards, but moving as if he was walking forwards. His legs bent the wrong way and his arms swung in reverse. His head was turned 180 degrees on his neck, but he moved with purpose, steadily approaching the booth. I locked the doors and waited, shotgun across my lap. When he made it to the booth, he stopped at the window. Up close, I could see his face was a mirror image of normal. Eyes where his mouth should be, mouth where his forehead should be. When he spoke, the words came out reversed. I had to record him on my phone and play it backwards to understand. "Let me in. I need to use your phone. There's been an accident." I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. But he pressed against the glass, and where his hands touched, frost began to form despite the summer heat. "Please, they're dying. All of them are dying. The bus crashed. So many." For a moment, I almost believed him. Almost reached for the door lock. And then I remembered the Greyhound from earlier. Was it connected? Was he trying to lure me out? I picked up the radio instead. "Dispatch, this is Denali Pass Toll. I need troopers here immediately. Possible injured civilians from a vehicle accident." The backwards man's face, or what passed for a face, contorted in rage. He beat against the glass with inhuman strength. The reinforced window cracked but held. He screamed, a sound that came out as a low rumbling growl. When reversed, what probably sounded like a death shriek in normal speech. And then he turned and walked away, backwards into the night. The troopers found no evidence of a crash and no evidence of the man, but the cracks in my window remained. September brought the return of darkness and with it a sense of building dread. I had survived almost a year at the toll booth, according to the records I had managed to dig up. Only 3 other attendants had lasted that long. I had tried to contact them to compare experiences, but one was in a psych hospital, one had disappeared completely, and one had died by his own doing, leaving a note that simply said, "They won't stop knocking." I understood that note now. As the nights grew longer, the knocking had started at my booth too, always between 3 and 4 in the morning, always in patterns of 3. Knock, knock, knock. Then a pause. Knock, knock, knock. From the roof, from under the floor, from inside the walls themselves. Not too long after this, I was met with my predecessor. A man approached the booth on foot, dressed in the same company uniform that I wore. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with hollow eyes and shaking hands. He looked familiar, and then I realized I had seen his photo in the employee files. Michael, the attendant who had worked this booth before me. "You're Garrett," he said. It wasn't a question. "Michael, they said you quit, had moved to California." He laughed bitterly. "Oh, is that what they said? No, I'm still here, I'll always be here." He looked around nervously. "They don't like it when I come too close to the booth, but I had to warn you. October's here and that's when it gets bad. It's when they get hungry." "Who gets hungry?" "All of them, everything out there. This whole place is alive and it's starving." He grabbed my arm through the window. His grip was ice cold. "They fed it last year. They fed it me. But I wasn't enough. I'm never enough." I tried to pull away, but his grip was inhumanly strong. "What are you talking about?" "Look at me. Really look at me." I did, and I saw. His uniform was torn and bloodstained. His skin frostbitten. His eyes were clouded with death. He wasn't alive. He hadn't been alive for a year. They'll come for you on Halloween. All of them at once. They'll come and they'll offer you a choice. "What choice?" "Feed the road or become the food." He released my arm and stepped back. "I chose wrong. Don't make my mistake." He walked backward into the darkness, fading like mist. On October 30th, Ezekiel Cray returned. His motorcycle rumbled up to the booth, but he looked different now. Even older and more worn, like he had aged a decade in the few months since I had last seen him. "Still here," he said, but it wasn't a greeting. It was a disappointment. "You said you make this run only once a year." "I do. Time moves differently here. Hasn't anybody told you?" "You know what tomorrow is?" "Yeah, Michael told me. They're coming." Ezekiel nodded slowly. "The Feast of the Road happens every year. The road demands payment for passage for all the lives that cross it, all the souls that it allows to pass. Usually it'll just take the toll booth attendant, but you've lasted longer than most. You're stronger. That means what?" "That means it's hungrier. One soul might not be enough anymore." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old leather journal. "This might help you. Accounts from previous attendants going back to when they built this road. The military knew what they were doing when they chose this route. They needed a way to contain certain things. The toll booth isn't just for collecting money." I took the journal with trembling hands. "What am I supposed to do?" "Survive until dawn, that's all. Make it to November 1st and you've got another year ahead of you." He started his engine. "Or run. Run now and never look back." "But if you run," he shook his head, "the road is a long memory and a longer reach." He drove off, leaving me with the journal. I spent the rest of my shift reading it, and I think I have a good idea on how I'm going to beat this thing. I won't make the same mistakes that those who came before me did. Halloween arrived with a blizzard. The snow started falling at sunset, thick and heavy. The wind howled with what sounded like voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, all crying out in hunger. I had prepared as best as I could. At exactly midnight, they came. First, it was Marissa Henley in her rust-eaten truck, but she wasn't alone. The passenger seat held a small figure in a green coat. Caitlin. They both stared at me with those hollow, frozen eyes. Then came the tour bus, Then the school bus and the backwards man approached. They all spoke at once, the cacophony of voices that somehow resolved into a single message. Choose. I understood then. I could join them and become another guardian of this stretch of road, forever collecting tolls from the living and the dead. Or I could offer them something else, something to take my place. From reading the journal, I saw that the previous attendants had made both choices. Those who joined the road became like Michael, eternal servants to its hunger. Those who offered others. The journal didn't say what happened to them. The journal didn't say what had happened to them, only that the road always collected its due, one way or another. I choose neither, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. They all stopped. In the silence, I could hear my heart pounding. The backwards man pressed against the glass, and when he spoke, his words were no longer reversed. That's not an option. It is, I insisted, remembering something from the journal. The original compact. When they built this road, when they made the first deal, there's a third option. The things outside were agitated. The storm intensified, battering the booth. Cracks began to appear in the walls. I offer myself as witness. I shouted over the wind. Not as food, not as a servant, but as a witness. To record what happens here and to remember the taken and to honor the original compact. For a long moment, nothing moved. And then Marissa stepped out of her truck. She approached the window, and when she spoke, her voice was clear for the first time. A witness must witness. Every night, every soul, every horror. Can you bear that burden? I can. She smiled, and then for a moment I saw her as she had been in life. A loving mother desperate to find her child. Well then witness this. The world exploded into visions. I saw the history of the road stretching back centuries. I saw the indigenous peoples who had first discovered what lay beneath this land, the thing that fed on travelers and demanded appeasement. I saw the Russians who tried to contain it with orthodox prayers and had failed. I saw the military engineers who had built the road as a cage, trapping the entity but also feeding it a steady stream of passers-by. I saw every person who had died on this road, every soul claimed by the hunger beneath. Thousands of them, each death playing out in excruciating detail. I felt their fear, their pain, their final moments. I saw the truth. The toll booth, it wasn't collecting money. It was collecting lives. And sometimes when the hunger grew to be too great, it collected them more directly. And when the visions ended, I was on the floor of the booth, blood running from my nose and ears. Dawn light filtered through the cracked windows. The storm had passed. The visitors were gone. But I knew that they would be back. Every night I would see them. Every soul that passed through my toll booth, I would know their fate. Those destined to feed the road would be marked, and I would witness their taking. That was my burden, my price for survival.
Nelson Asada, Dice Creamy, Meat Cashier, Malcolm Black, Talamagara, Justin Fodenauer, That One Woodsman, Die Can't Play, Dino, Deggy, MP Massacre 91, Leon Knott, SWAT, Kathy McGuire, Jimmy Griffin, Miss Eldridge, Dragon Slayer 048, Takeo Zarilla, Sanjay Anthem, Sleepy Shroomy, Mark Norman, Minaling Gitter, Richard French, yours truly, Omni Rubix, Sonic GMT, Wayward Son, Caleb Windsor, Never Enough, Russell and Flo, Stevie B76, Shrimpo the Shrimp, Genevieve Sweet, Lone Wolf Sam, Ivory Sage, Lunas TV, I am Loki 5849, Chicago born and